Hey, Dan, thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
Hey,
Uh,
how's it going?
let's feature you here front and center. I don't know who Geoff McFetridge is, and I am a huge fan of just documentaries about artists. I was not aware of his work, but I certainly know it. I was shocked how much his work showed up like in movies on my Apple Watch, which like I saw his watch is his art is one of the uh faces for the watch. Tell me, how did you discover Geoff McFetridge?
Yeah, I studied graphic design in the early 2000s, and that was kind of when he was starting his journey. And there's this show called Beautiful Losers. It was a big street art show. He was kind of part of that movement. So that was like where he got on my radar, kept tabs on him for the next 20 years, and then had an opportunity to kind of start diving in on this project. But yeah, he was like a hero of mine for a long period of time, and to be able to kind of like take a step back and have this interaction and make a film was a fantastic experience.
How did you convince him? Because I was amazed. First of all, the movie is like a tight 90 minutes ish. It's You get into so much depth about him and how he just sees things differently, even how he works with directors like Spike Jones and among others. It was and Sofia Coppola, and I realized I have seen his work everywhere. How did you convince him to give such a personal look? And then also at the process, you see him in his workspace and revealing kind of maybe how his brain works, which isn't like a lot of other people, which shouldn't surprise you.
We basically kind of like I had met him once prior. We'd done a short film together. An opportunity came up to do another short film for an award he'd won, and I was like, "Hey, let's use this opportunity to film together for a little bit, see how we vibe for a longer, and then start a longer project." And he was like, "Okay, let's see where I go." It wasn't like, "Yes, let me sign on from day one." It was like, "Let's see where it goes and kind of like how we could build it." And then, with any subject, it's just trust over time. It's just showing him we know what we're doing, showing him my intentions, showing him that he can trust us to tell his story. And then slowly but slowly, he invites us into more and more of his life.
And the part of the movie was also shot during COVID. So how do you like nap? We've interviewed a lot of doc filmmakers who didn't stop working. They, rolled with the punches. How did you navigate that? It's not a big part of the movie, but it's there and present.
It didn't really change our production at all because the crew is tiny anyway. It's just three of us. You know what I mean? It's just a DP, a director who's myself, and then a sound person. So he lives in LA, I live in New York. So we still had the same kind of amount of trips. It was more of like how we cover it in the film, or do we cover it in the film? And I came back to he saw COVID in a very specific way and wrote this piece for the New York Times about it and did these paintings. So I felt like it was necessary to show how he went through this experience through his art and how he was able to communicate this experience we all went through, because I felt like it was a way for the audiences to kind of like see into a mind of someone that we all went through this experience. This is how he dealt with it and showed it in a poetic, artful way. So it was important to me that it was in there, but I didn't want to make it this giant part of the movie. There was we did a lot of test screenings and people were like, take it out. I don't want to think about COVID. Or some people were like, this is amazing. So we had to take a step back and be like, is this worth including or not? And what is the intention of including it? It's only like 3 minutes in an 80-minute film. So it's quite tiny, but I think because everyone has been through that experience, they have a lot more impact from seeing COVID reflected in culture.
I have to say, I do appreciate it because we've seen a lot of docs that were made during that time and or in that, where it crosses over. And I'm glad you acknowledged it and moved on. So good on your friends for giving you those notes. Um, can you tell us, like, for those who don't know Jeff's work, and we should maybe take a look at the trailer. But if you don't know his work, can you say like where it just pops up or how you would know it? And we'll watch the trailer in a minute. I'll find it here.
Yeah, I mean, he's worked on every one of Spike Jonze's films. I think most notably Her and Where the Wild Things Are. He did the title sequence for Virgin Suicides, the Apple Watch face you mentioned, tons of stuff for Warby Parker if you're in Los Angeles or in other areas of the country. Logo for Freaks and Geeks. countless times it's here. So I think once you see the trailer, you'd be like, oh, I've seen that, you know?
That's how I felt when I saw the trailer and the movie. And that's how I felt, is like, how is it? Because what I love about artists, documentaries or profiles, or books about artists is process. He really, how did you get him to open up about the process? Like, it's about, and he talks about this, just you have to be in the right mental state. Your space matters, where you work, how you can get your mind focused. And I love hearing about that from both writers and artists. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I also am an artist. I have been practicing for 10 years. So I think I know that language. I know what it feels like to be in a blank room with a blank piece of paper and understand what it means to make something. So I think from there, we're starting on a level playing field, and I can kind of dive into those subjects with him and like understand that process of creation. But I think you are right, honing in on the notion that it's not like Jackson Pollock, who it's fueled by alcohol and cigarettes and all these other. It's like it's fueled by how can I be a better person, how can I treat my body with care and respect and as a machine. And it's all about this process of kind of like honing and honing and honing of how do you make your life better and more functional. And you can see that in the work gets better and better and better over time, because he's really these microscopic details that he's dialing in order to kind of dial in his life. Spike said a line that we kind of like we took out of the film, I think ultimately in the final cut, but it's like, it's basically like a pebble that he's like rounding and rounding and rounding the sharp edges off the pebble very slowly, and kind of building out this career, this body of work. Like, what's too big, what's too small? Do I care about money? Do I care about artistic success? Like all these things, he's kind of like dialing in. How big does my studio get? Is there 15 people or is there one person? Like all those things are within his control, and he's like continually tweaking and dialing those in.
And it's also refreshing. I'll say we have like over 2,000 people watching live. They have questions for you. We'll get to your chat questions, viewer questions after we watch the trailer. But it's refreshing to see an artist profile doc about someone who's not a drug addict or, alcohol, personal demons. I mean, he really, and his really beautiful relationship with his daughter, that's a part of it. Like, it was like, oh, refreshing. This is like an artist focus on the art and not like battling a past trauma, whatnot.
It's interesting. Like when I started, I'd been a fan of the work, and I expected that was a facade, this like good guy, nice guy thing, and I was going to crack it and see a darkness underneath it. And it was almost the inverse, where I cracked it and it was like, no, it's all about living with intention, living positively, refining your life, trying to balance all of these things. And that was kind of refreshing. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, how do you make that a compelling film? Because you need to have some kind of conflict or tension, or else it's just like a puff piece. So it was something along the lines where we were just like, how is the dialogue he's having more insular? How do you bring that outward and show that there were struggles along the way? And there were times where he was going in this direction, he needed to be going in that direction. So we kind of focus more on the life journey and the inward journey than this like crazy battle with like drugs or alcohol or philandering or these types of things, which you might expect in somebody who's operating at this kind of like, he's not like a rock star who's going around the world being chaotic. It's more about like, how am I a better human?
Let's take a look at the trailer and we'll go to your questions, everyone who's watching. So let me see. I'll set this up. Alan, you know what to do. I found this on YouTube. So let's go.
You'll see a Pepsi billboard, Apple Watch face, but you don't know his name necessarily.
I'm from the suburbs. I was interested in geometry ever since I was a little kid.
He literally drew 3 hours an evening.
I need a way out of life today. A friend of mine became a pro snowboarder. He asked me, oh, will you do my graphic? That was like the light bulb going off. That's graphic design. There was a lot sort of happening at that moment.
We're all mid-20s and making stuff and helping each other make stuff.
The worst thing anyone could be was like a corporate sellout.
Having kids is a lot of pressure. He felt like it was really important to have a job. I was always like, art is so much more important.
Starting my own studio, It wasn't a business. I was experimenting. I'm going to fill the room with me stuff, like my mind.
There's definitely a lot going on in his head.
I was sort of redefining how I worked and where it would go.
The guy is nonstop. He knows how to push himself. Jeff is a control freak, for sure.
I'm going to run myself into the ground.
Do you ever just like chill?
Nope. Jeff's drawings have something different.
It's not an accident that the largest corporations want to pick his brain about how to communicate with visual language.
Please welcome to the stage, Geoff MCFETRIDGE.
I look up to the part of him that balances work and being an artist with life.
It's like super infinite.
Wow. That was just, it reminds me just watching the movie for the first time and just, I watched it twice, by the way. I felt so inspired because I am a graphic design nerd. I read like Confessions of an Ad Man, Ogilvy and Mather, those books. I've read books about fonts and font design. Graphics have been, I'm not sure if you're aware, Film Threat magazine was a print magazine in the 90s. It was so important for me for it to be completely unique. And I just always have an appreciation for graphic design, and this movie really loved it. So thank you for that, for all the inspiration. Let's go to, we have a lot of comments in the chat here. So let's look at this. We'll get to these questions here from Go Party Time. Jeff is such a great artist. Excited to see this. You will leave inspired. Trust me. Solomon Thornton, greetings, Sir Dan. What was the process of getting this documentary made?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long process of like idea of conception, and then how do you figure out the funding? You know, in our case, I own a production company that creates commercials. So we basically like have a lot of equipment and relationships with cinematographers and sound people, and we just start making it, you know what I mean? And it's just like here and there, you're kind of patching this thing together. It's just truly an independent movie. It's not like a giant Netflix or HBO production. It's like we're pushing the boulder up over our hill, and like we're all kind of getting out there because we believe in the subject, we believe in the process. So, you know, it's a 4-year journey. We're excited for it to come out and kind of like have you all see it. But yeah, it's just been a kind of duct tape and Band-Aid production, and we're just getting there. You know what I mean?
From Professor Fear, do you own any original McFetridge art?
I do own some original. I'm lucky that I've been a fan for a long time, so I was able to buy it when I could still afford it. I don't think I can afford it as much anymore. But, yes, luckily I have a couple pieces in my collection.
And from Rumble, Aid Ellis 24, was Jeff inspired by the 20th century work of British painter L.S. Laurie?
He didn't mention his work specifically. A lot of influences, we chose not to include that in the film, who specifically he was influenced by, because that becomes a can of worms. But I think one of his biggest influences is Saul Steinberg, who's an artist who did a lot of New Yorker covers and kind of like similar line work in kind of thinking. But he has a bajillion influences. Yeah.
And he also goes on to say, Aid Ellis 24, in what ways does the city of New York inspire and influence the work of Jeff?
It's interesting. He's actually an LA-based artist, and his relationship to New York, I think, is a little, both in terms of when he first showed in New York, it was a big milestone for him, but I think he feels like the work always feels a little out of place in New York City. So he's more of kind of an LA outdoor organic, and then New York is like not always that. So it is interesting if like sometimes he says his shows in New York feel it's just a different thing for him because he's so used to a different environment.
And let's see here. Hail from the nerd far away. Hail, Mr. Covert. Which movie do you think best captures the value of art? Not your movie, but other movies. That value varies widely, but it's important. And I'd like to know the story you would pick.
There's these two films about the artist Andy Goldsworthy that are worth looking up. Value is a very tricky word because you start to think about money, and I don't necessarily think of that what I'm talking about here, but they're put out, at least the first one was put out by Magnolia. I let me look at whatever. You guys can Google Andy Goldsworthy. He's an artist, but it's a lot of him talking to camera about thoughts that he's dealing with in the artistic process. The movies are insanely simple. There's really no narrative other than you're watching a land artist out in the world talk about his art. But I think I got a lot out of those in terms of like artistic inspiration and kind of process.
Well, that's the big question. Like with artists, it's always, I think, a battle between, well, I have to live and eat, but the battle between the corporate world, which I think is the worst place for art to exist. If like just knowing, you know, people in the industry, a lot of friends who are in the industry, it's like a constant battle it's like siloing yourself away from corporate to actually be able to do something meaningful. Right. That's and that is discussed quite a bit in your film. Brock Samsonite.
I'll just say, I'm sorry, Leaning into the Wind. That's the Magnolia Pictures.
Yeah. Oh, good. Brock Samsonite, what was Jeff's main art medium?
Now it's primarily drawing, pencil and paper, and painting, kind of acrylic paint that he's using these elaborate stenciling and spraying. So primarily known for painting and drawing at this point.
Hey, it's me in HD, who's a member, asks, oh man, this is my type of jam. Where can I see this, Mr. Covert? And kudos on the awesome job. This looks hella good.
Thank you. Thank you. On July 2nd, which I believe is next Tuesday, it's going to be available on VOD. So in the United States and Canada, you can go to iTunes, Amazon, all those jams and buy it on buy or rent on VOD. And then anywhere overseas that's not US or Canada, you can go to Vimeo on demand and be able to buy it there as well.
And Bush and Ryu Cat sends in for Dan, AI mustn't replace artists like Jeff. Yeah, AI that's a whole other documentary topic. But any thoughts on that?
I think it's almost impossible to replace someone like him. While it might be able to generate and rip off his formal language, I think what's interesting about Jeff is there is a thinking and intention behind the work that you never would be able to replicate with just digital recreation.
And a quick kudos to you for including Chip Kidd in the doc. I'm a fan of Chip Kidd. I love his TED Talk. So he came up with the logo for the Jurassic Park book cover, which extended to the movies. So I'm definitely a graphic design nerd, if that can exist. Question, a good final question here from comment here from Patrick Lemire. McFetridge reminds me of Raymond Laurie. Laurie designer, everything from logos to trains to cars. A guy who no one knows, but everyone knows his stuff.
Yeah, I think that generation, kind of the Eames, the George Nelson, these people that were operating across multi-mediums, very high level. That's an inspiration, I think, to Jeff, and then Jeff's generation of those artists is an inspiration to my generation. So it's kind of like this continual cycle of these people who are operating at a crazy high caliber and how they're inspiring the next generations to come.
Dan Covert, thank you so much for joining us. Your film, Geoff McFetridge, Drawing a Life, is out on VOD July 2nd. I appreciate you so much. I made documentary films myself. I'm trying to finish one right now. It's a labor of love. I notice you don't have a butler. Documentaries, you do it for the love and the passion. And this movie just bleeds passion and love. And I thank you for doing this. And thank you for being on the show on Film Threat.
Thank you for the kind review of the movie, and thank you for shining the light on us. We really appreciate it, man.
Great. All right. Have a great weekend. Take care.
Bye, guys.